This is Kelly.
And this is Amy.
And you're listening to Diary of a Death Investigator. We've been off for a couple weeks, not on purpose.
It's been busy.
It's been busy. Would you like to share your new life news?
Well, I'm moving, so traveling multiple states over. So going back home actually this week. And Kelly's actually flying out here to travel with me.
Oh, yeah. So excited. I am excited, actually. I'm not excited about the drive because I don't think I've ever driven over 24 hours straight before. So that's not super exciting.
We're here to break records, Kelly. Because Dad's always telling me, he's like, I made it in this many hours. And I'm like, oh, okay. So it's a challenge now. So
yeah, but I like to stop and eat and go to the bathroom. But I mean, yeah, I guess we'll see.
It's a race against Dad.
But driving within the speed limit.
Air quotes.
Dad, we're going to be driving. We'll drive how you drive.
Nothing over 10 miles per hour over the speed limit.
Yeah, so Amy's officially moving. It all has happened within the last couple of weeks, which is why we have been putting off recording this episode because she's been packing and I've been traveling a lot for work. Got to do some really cool stuff this past week. So anyway, stars aligned. Today was the day. We're off by a couple of days, but hopefully life happens. But all good things. So we're just putting out positive energy into the universe because we need some positive energy back.
You know, I feel like I have really good karmic energy coming my way because I told you I've been taking care of all these animals in my yard, saving them from my serial killer cat. So
I understand that. So we're currently on part 5. So Amy and I had to math a second ago. So we're on episode 54.
Math is hard.
Yeah, we've done 5 episodes. We're on 55. Wait, no, we're on 54. So this one is going to be about the trial. So these past 4 episodes, we've been talking about the Idaho murders. So for those of you that are not familiar, you should go back and listen to the first episode because you're going to be a little lost. But if you are defiant and just want to listen to this episode, it's big news still. So back in November of 22, 4 students were killed in their home in the early mornings. We're still trying to figure it out, but between 4 and 4:25 in the morning. There were 2 survivors in the house. The house was a tri-level house, so it's really interesting to see where the murders took place and where the survivors were at the time. Amy has walked through the forensics part of it, how a death investigator would walk through the house. So now with all of this knowledge, we're coming up to what are we going to see during the trial? Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot of information we don't know. We talked about it on past episodes. There's a gag order in place, so no one is allowed to talk about it, which I get that.
It's out there, and with all the information that's already out there, and you have like your cyber sleuths, you have documentaries and books coming out already, and the guy or the suspect hasn't even been convicted, right? We just have an indictment. So how do you not know? And that's what we had been talking about earlier, is like, how would you not know about this? You would have to live under a rock with zero technology or access to even newspapers or internet, right? So it was everywhere.
Right. And it's been so shocking, I think, for a lot of people because it was in a small town. And again, we've talked about this on past episodes. It's like, no one thinks that this is going to happen to them and no one thinks it's going to happen in a small town. And we've talked about, there's a whole podcast, small town murder. So I feel like if you live in a small town, then you should be careful. I live in a small town and there's a famous serial killer. I think he's still alive in jail and he's from here. You never know. So
it's crime of opportunity, I think, is a lot of it, but this is definitely something that was planned. So I think that's what makes it such a shocking case, because people are really trying to figure out how could this have happened to 4 people in that amount of time. So I think that's why it's been so popular.
I also think because the kids were so well liked and there's a college town and we know kids, and we talked about this on past episode too, we know that there's more than meets the eye on this, because especially with the evidence that no one's talking about, these kids know something. And it's surprising to me that the kids have been able to stay quiet for this long. And what we've talked about on past episodes, the last episode was kids aren't very good at being quiet, and they're not, well, I shouldn't say they're not. They are skilled at figuring out ways of communicating when communication isn't available. So Amy mentioned this on our last episode about kids using Google Docs or Google presentations to communicate.
Yes.
We know that kids use
Snapchat.
Yeah. So one of the first things I think that we're going to see when this trial comes out, or when the trial finally starts. Well, actually, let's back up for a second. The trial isn't scheduled until June of 25.
Correct.
It was supposed to happen this year.
Yeah, over the summer. I think it was originally supposed to happen in June, I thought. But what we know now is that they're really pushing for a change of venue.
And why would they want to change the venue?
Okay, so what I found out was Ann Taylor, who is the public defender over this trial, she did what they call like a jury poll. So they basically looked at the population of who would be in their jury pool if this were to stay in the area. So when they sent this out, they basically were asking questions like, do you know about the case? Do you know about who the suspect is at this time? If you were selected as a juror, would you be able to be impartial? Would you basically be open to listening to the evidence and be able to make an unbiased opinion? And so what happened from that is, we already know the area is small, right? That's not a very populated state. So either you're related or you know someone. I mean, everyone knows somebody, I think, probably in small towns, right?
Yeah, 100%.
They're connected in some way. So when they did this, it basically, they were saying, well, you just tainted your whole jury-like field. And now that's where the gag order is in effect, because basically what Ann Taylor did was, she's trying to help her client, right? But that's something that they do in voir dire. When you go into court and you're trying to select your jurors, you ask them these questions anyways. But there again, it's expensive to go through all those days of court, because voir dire can last 4 days. That's why you go to jury selection, right? And you sit there for days. And that's because sometimes they might have to fill in another position of a juror that maybe can't do it anymore, or something happened where they said something about the case, because technically jurors aren't supposed to, when they are assigned to a case, they're not supposed to be talking to anyone about the case. They're not supposed to be looking at anything online or, reading any news. Yeah, not supposed to. But now in like our day and age, how do you not just shut yourself off completely when it's literally everywhere? So I know people even have like updates sent to their phone, right, where the notification goes off. So I think that, yeah, she kind of screwed herself up there, but maybe in a sense she was thinking, this is a surefire way for me to get a change of venue, because now, not only if they didn't know before, they're going to be clued into looking that up to see, oh, well, what do I know? What is the update about this case? So,
well, okay, let me ask you this. Do you think that she wanted the gag order and she did it on purpose because now nobody can talk about the case?
And that could be too, because we don't know a lot of evidence about this case, and we haven't really seen a lot of like interviews and stuff. The only thing I've seen or heard of as far as like interviews was one of the surviving kids from the house. And they were saying like, she basically doesn't go out anymore. She stays at home. She plays like video games and stuff because she's been basically harassed online by strangers. So,
well, they moved. Both of the survivors moved. I don't think either live in Idaho anymore.
But people still find you on the internet, right?
Well,
and that's pretty easy. Yeah, that's pretty easy to do now. And you don't need much information, especially if, you're someone that is big on social media. We know that these girls posted pictures all the time on social media. And that's probably to do with like the Greek life and stuff like that too, because I know that they're responsible for doing that kind of stuff. But if they were involved in sororities and stuff. But if they have people at their house all the time, I mean, how many pictures would they be in with those other people from the school? So I think she's getting a lot of flack now from people about like, why didn't you call the cops earlier? And why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? I mean, she's still a kid. So.
Well, not anymore. She's not. I mean, this has happened. Now we're talking, by the time this comes out, it'll be 3 years. I've seen pictures of them, though, from 3 years ago to now, and they're growing up, right? Like, this is a big part of their lives.
I'm still thinking about what my early 20 brain was like, and it was still very irresponsible. And I mean, you're not mature by that age. I mean, you're still in that state of these kids were partying and stuff all the time. I mean, you kind of live in this world when you're that age that like nothing bad's going to happen to you. And then when it finally does, I think it was probably like a state of shock of, oh, this is happening to me. So I don't know, maybe that could be part of it too. But talking about if she did this on purpose, I think there's so much negative stuff about Brian. And so maybe in a way to kind of protect her client, maybe she did do this. I think she's very intelligent. So I don't think she does anything that's not, I don't want to say calculated.
Because let's go back. So I actually am surprised that this is what got her in trouble-ish, because she's pretty familiar with the case even before she started representing Brian Kohberger.
Yes, which I didn't know until here. It was even, this is such a popular case or highly publicized that this was like on Perez Hilton. And I'm like, why is a celebrity columnist or whatever, journalist, whatever you want to call him? I don't even, if I'd even go that far as to gossiper.
Blogger.
Yeah, blog. Okay, yeah. Yeah, that's essentially what it is. But this was even on his page. So if that tells you anything, so you know it's in magazines and posted at a grocery store, right? You're checking out, there's magazines with his face on it or her face. So
yeah.
Victims. Yeah. So I didn't know about this until doing research about her. And that's when kind of all this stuff came up. So I'll give a little background about her first. So what we do know about her. So she is a public defender. So she's basically going to be like randomly assigned to cases. Or in this case that we'll see is she is one of two attorneys. So it's basically her and the assistant public defender that are basically qualified to represent someone in a capital trial case, because there's a lot that goes into those cases. So prior to being a public defender, she practiced at her own law firm. So she had her own law firm. It was Palmer, George, and Taylor. So in 2017, June of 2017, that's when she was named the chief public defender of, I guess it's Kootenai Public Defender's Office. And so basically what we know, this was posted back in early 2023. So this happened in November 2022, right? She was supposed to be defending one of the parents' upcoming trials, but has also defended for two other parents. So we know that she was set to represent one of the victims' mothers. And I think it's her. So the name is different. It's Kernoodle's mother, but she has a different last name. And so it was supposed to be for an unrelated drug charge case. And so basically the mother was pulled over, I think it was 6 days after the murders had happened, and she was found with drugs. And so she had this drug charge against her. And so that's when, this is now 2023, because we all know trials are not quick. So yeah, Taylor was assigned to her. And so we see, though, this was January 5th, 2023. Taylor withdrew her services after working on Kernoodle's mother's case for like a month. And so this same day, so January 5th, when she withdrew her defense for the mom, this was the same day that she was seen representing Brian in court for his first appearance in Idaho. So, of course, that's pretty shocking to the mom, but I guess she also represented, I think it was Maddie's parents. So the father, he had 2 counts of drug charges in 2020. And then she actually got those charges dropped down to a 90-day sentence. And then she also represented the stepmother on a misdemeanor and 2 felony drug charges. And then she eventually got that plead down to 1 felony charge. And that closed just 2 days before Kohberger's arrest. So this is all happening really within kind of all the same time span, or really close to when all this happened. So yeah, I definitely think that there is an issue there. She has someone on the trial with her. Her name is, I think it's Elisa Masseth, and she's the criminal justice panel representative and the former president of the Idaho Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. So Brian's got a pretty good defense team here set up for him.
And would they travel if he ends up in a different county or a different place? Would they stay with him, or does it go to the public defender of that county?
No, she would stay with him. Basically, it's whoever would be bringing the charges, what county it happens in, that's where the charges are going to be brought. So basically what happens in something like any type of crime, it has to go through the police first, or the jurisdiction. So the sheriff or state representative and whatever county that is for that jurisdiction. And they will decide if they want to pursue charges or not. So whichever jurisdiction, so it's Moscow PD, right? So it has to be within that same county if they are bringing charges against him. So that's why she would basically say, and she's getting paid what I saw, $200 an hour for the case, which is estimated to be an extra $8,000 a week. And this would increase her salary between what we know, her range should be between like 119 to 172. And that's just kind of the range of what you would see for a like chief public defender. Public defenders don't make anything. So basically what she could make off of just from this one case would be $384,000 a year. Her co-counsel will be making $180 an hour, but they're getting paid. This is just for 40 hours a week. So if they're doing any overtime, they're not getting paid extra for that. But typically a public defender, which this is similar in the state that I'm in, they're only getting paid, and this is like a decent wage, is a little over $54,000 a year. And that's just a public defender. So, and that can even range from like 40 something thousand. So you're not making a lot of money. You're only set on, usually it's just like salary range. It's not like per hour that you do. Whereas it's like, if you went to a private firm or had a private defense that you hired, they would charge you typically, I think it's like $400 an hour or more, depending upon who they are and how good they are, how well known.
So is this an incentive for her to keep the trial going also? Because as long as it's going, she's making money?
Yeah. I don't think that that would be a bad thing to say. I mean, without knowing her intentions behind everything that she does. Like I said, I think everything she does is pretty calculated. So yeah, it probably doesn't hurt for her to be making more money. But I think we talked about this when we were referring to like small town stuff, right? Moscow in that county is not made to have the financial backing for this kind of stuff. So who pays the public defender? It's the county, right? So this county that they're in is going to be paying her salary. It's county, so taxpayers, right? And we've already talked about how the investigation process has really affected the town in a financial way, because of how many hours that they've had to put in for this investigation. So now think about, okay, well, this trial keeps getting put off for months and months, and she now has this set pay. Well, who's paying that? So then what's going to happen to the town and to that county? Are they going to raise their taxes? What are they going to do to fund this? I mean, public defenders are called public defenders for a reason. They're usually randomly assigned to cases, but because apparently she's only one of 2 that can work this capital trial. Yeah, it helps her. It hurts the county and the state overall more because of this.
So the charges that are being brought against him, there's 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of burglary. Why burglary? So we know that murder because there's 4 victims, but why burglary?
It's being in the act of breaking and entering into the household. I mean, he didn't have the intent to steal things, I don't think. So it's burglary because of that break and enter. That's basically what the law states for burglary.
Okay. And then I have another question. It said that he had a secret grand jury, or there was a secret grand jury. What is that?
So basically, you're not going to know any of the details about that jury pool. So it's also called like an anonymous jury. So it's basically to protect those jurors from getting any backlash from what they decide from this case, right? Because that's happened in other cases before where they don't get the verdict that they want, like the family or something. And if they know who those jurors are that are sitting on that case, they have their name and stuff, they can start harassing them and, sending them death threats. It's happened before. So you see this kind of stuff, or you've seen it in trials where it's like mob type of things, because what do we know about the mob? So they want them to be protected. It's basically why this is called like an anonymous jury. And because we know it's so highly publicized, right? So one is to keep them from basically the media finding out anything about them. Because what if there's someone on there that is friends with him or is like a mutual friend or something, and it comes back as like he's not guilty, or maybe he is guilty and there are people that think he's not. So it's to protect them from that. Jury tampering is another thing. You don't want to get solicited from any biases. So anyone that would contact you about this to sway you one way or another. So paying someone like in a jury pool, like say for like a mob case or something, you'll pay like a juror if you know who they are, like, hey, this way against like a not guilty verdict, right? And like I said, like social pressures, like how someone should decide based upon like what you would see like the general population believing that it is, because this is so highly publicized and because there is so much out there about him. So a typical jury like trial, you'll have like 12 people in that, but this will have 16 to 23. And so basically if they have to kick a juror off for any reasons, another one can step in to where they don't have to basically dismiss the trial, or maybe if they're coming back for appeals later on, that they're not saying like this juror knew this about this, like had a preconception or something that would affect them in a way of their decisions. And so they'll have more people to choose from, and you get a better chance instead, because it just takes one person to like hold out on a jury, right? In order to keep someone from making a decision. So basically all the things about them, so like their names, their addresses, their personal identification, it's withheld from attorneys as well. So attorneys, the public, and the media. So that's an anonymous jury.
So I think, was the anonymous jury, I should probably know this, but didn't he have what is that trial called when you enter a plea?
Like his indictment?
Yeah, so I think that was a secret jury then, maybe.
I'm not sure.
So what I know a little bit about, so he did waive his right to a speedy trial. Why would he do that?
Well, he basically did that because it gives your attorney time to catch up on the case, for one, because we know she stepped in January 5th. So it gives them time to basically go find witnesses. In discovery, it should be shared from basically what the other side has like knowledge to. So they're supposed to share that in discovery with them as well. So any evidence that they have. And I think that it was stated that prosecution had multiple like thumb drives of evidence, but they had not disclosed that to her. So I think that they actually had they had to meet with a judge or go in for, I'm not exactly sure what the term would be for that, but in order for her to be able to get that evidence, they had to go in. And she's basically saying like, hey, I don't have this stuff and you guys apparently do. Like, we need to sit down and go through like all the evidence that you guys do have, because I haven't seen all these thumb drives. So it's giving your attorney time to basically form a case for you.
Okay. So I have two questions with his indictment hearing, which it said he would not enter a plea. And then it said that he remained silent, but that was in quotes. Like he would remain silent was what I think Ann Taylor told the judge. So what does that mean?
He's just basically not admitting to any type of guilt. So basically not giving like a guilty or innocent. It leaves it open to interpretation there again, to where it's not going to be like biased. And he's basically, him being silent would basically be him saying like he's not guilty. But there again, he's not admitting to being one way or the other, because maybe they could still find him guilty of it.
But why not just say not guilty?
I can't tell you. She might have instructed him to do that. And there again, I think that could probably buy her more time to form a case for him.
I did see him during his trial, or they showed pictures of him, and you could see him like clenching his teeth. So I think that's stress maybe, or trying to keep his mouth shut.
Yeah, it could be a lot of things, right? Because what kind of emotions usually grit your teeth, like anger? Yeah, maybe he was just instructed not to say anything. And so and it could be just him trying to like even hide his emotions from his face. So because everyone's watching you, right? If you're being recorded and people are in there taking pictures of you, they're watching every reaction that you have to those things being said about you and to you. So that could also maybe have been him just trying to keep like a straight face to where he didn't react. Because I know that I've seen things that have swayed jurors because they're like, oh, they smiled during that. So
yeah, I mean, it's probably hard to keep your emotions under control. So I just thought it was interesting when I saw him, because I was like, oh, maybe he does feel something. Because he's usually, I don't know, I always feel like he has the same facial expression, which I'd have to practice that because I have really...
I do too. I have a very expression. Yeah, I would not.
Animated?
Yes. You know what I'm thinking, so.
Does every person on trial wear a vest, like a bulletproof vest?
Not typically. There again, it's because of it being so highly publicized.
I'm guessing. I don't know if he is, but I was just wondering if he was, because then I thought maybe that was a dumb question to even ask. So I didn't know if everybody wears one or if just certain people wear them.
If they know there's going to be a lot of people waiting outside the courtroom while he's being transferred from room to room, we know how upset people are about this. So people that assume that he's already guilty, yeah, I mean, it's happened before. People have been shot before. You mean sometimes you even see like upset family members go after offenders or suspects when they're literally sitting in the courtroom. So there again, it's keeping your emotions right in check.
So we've given some information about the people who are going to be doing the trial. I feel like now we need to get to what are we going to see during the trial. So we do expect to see him in a bulletproof vest.
It'll be on, I'm sure. I would be very surprised if he did not, unless it was his own choice, literally saying, no, I don't want this on.
Going back to what I started to say earlier about kids and information. So what I think we'll also see during the trial is we're going to see all these text messages and social media exchanges going on. We said it in the last episode. I think it was forensics that we said that there's like 12 hours of TikTok exchanges missing from some kid's phone. He said he was in a group chat with people.
Or Snapchat.
Yeah, Snapchat. So that's missing. So we do know that there is some information that we've heard, but we haven't been privy to. So we definitely will see some of that, right?
Both sides, I think. So also introduced into evidence will probably be anything that would be from his search histories as well. We talked about, like the Snapchat and stuff, but also think like Google, any types of searches, any purchases that were made online, that can all be traced. So we don't know a lot about his side of things as far as other than what we've seen from like his cell phone data of like where he was traveling. There hasn't really been anything stated as to him necessarily making purchases online or what his searches are. And that's all going to be brought out in the trial as well.
Yeah, because we don't know if he knew them. I mean, I hear back and forth. I hear, oh, yeah, he was trying to date one of them or he was hitting on one of them. And then you hear like, oh, no, he didn't know them at all. Or, oh, he was stalking them online. So it's like, okay, I think people are just throwing ideas out into.
That's also something that's very dangerous about this case, I think, is people making speculations and putting them out like on TikTok or something where they say things that they think are factual. Like that, where it's because it's very convoluted. It can really make for a messy trial. And then really you would need more witnesses to back those things up because, oh, you think he was stalking her? Well, what's your proof? So that's more witnesses that you have to bring in. And witnesses can sit on the stand for hours because you'll have your prosecutor and then you'll have your defense and then you might have cross questioning. So it can go back and forth for a long time. And so even witnesses are required to stay or be free for a certain amount of days, because as long as you're going to be questioned for, that's how long you need to be available for. And it's probably determined upon each witness, like case by case for each witness. So we'll probably see the survivor. I think they have to testify. Yeah, that would be very hard. There again, we already know she's kind of being like bullied online by people. And so I think she's essentially gone into hiding. So this would be like a first like public kind of appearance for her facing, like I said, anything that's being said openly in court, that's always forever going to be put on a record. And you have media or whatever, they can misconstrue her words as well. And so, yeah, we're going to see testimony from the survivors that were there that night as well. And that could be something that could go on for days.
Do you think they'll bring in Brian's family because they allegedly said he was behaving weird? Or we saw on the video, if you guys YouTube it, you can see where Brian was pulled over a couple of times and the patrol officer filmed it. And the dad was saying the most random things. And you're like, whoa, that's kind of, and not random in like, it's like super crazy out of this world type things. But he kept going back to an incident that happened in Washington. Like, I think it was someone had been killed. And he kept saying like, oh
that's Pennsylvania, when he lived there close to his parents.
No, there was something happened at Brian's like right before they left to make the travel. And so he was like shook. But I feel like he was shook because I feel like he associated it maybe with the Idaho murders. So, I mean, I feel like he was just kind of out of, I don't know.
Paranoid. It seemed like he was paranoid is what it was.
Yeah. It seemed like he was paranoid. Sorry, I'm like lost for words. I haven't eaten solid food in a couple days.
I definitely agree. I think that the parents will be called because we know that. And what I was saying about Pennsylvania, I thought that's what you're referring to, was that we saw a woman's remains that were found. And we know that they were saying that Brian was within like 30 miles of this. Well, the location where the body was found. And it's also like, that's where he was like going to school at the time. And then his parents also lived close. And so I know that his parents were already questioned about that. So I think they actually had to go to court on that in Pennsylvania. At least that's almost positive. That's what I read online. Like we said, different sources, different things. But I think one side or the other, they're going to want to call them on as witnesses to sit on the stand. And that can help or hinder his case, especially because the dad was with him while he was traveling and he could kind of see his state of mind before the arrest and leading up to the arrest. And who knows you better than anyone, typically your family, right? So they'll probably ask them to testify on his character as well. Like, you know, what type of kid was he when he was growing up? Was he interested in these kinds of things? Did you ever hear him talk about crime or homicide? Which it can help and hinder him that he is interested in this because he's going to school for it. But I mean, there again, how many people are interested in true crime podcasts and documentaries and stuff? So they'll be probably questioning, I would say for certain, the dad, maybe even his sister. So I think that...
Is that because she made the comment, like we heard that she made the comment that she asked her dad if he did it?
Yeah. So, I mean, because basically you would have to refute that. If it's not true, you have to stand up there and put that on the record if you're refuting that or if you're confirming it, because now that's out there for basically prosecution to be like, well, even your sister thinks that you did this, which I don't know if he'll sit on the stand or not to be questioned, because I think that would probably hurt him more. So
yeah,
he would be opened up to so many different lines of questioning. So if we saw him getting put on the stand to witness, I would be very shocked if we did.
Well, she would assume that she has a good defense if she does put him on the stand. And
like, he better have something really good to say.
Well, I don't know if he has something good to say, but what you've said and written down here is the defense says 3 unidentified male DNA was found on the scene. Maybe that came from me, and that could have been from Howard Bloom's book. But I'm not surprised that 3 different males' DNA were found on the scene, because
it's a party house.
Right. In our last episode, we were talking about how you have to go through every single room when something like this happens, and you have to investigate. So you're taking notes and pictures and fingerprints of anything that you feel is...
Everything, because anyone can be a suspect in that. Like, I was listening to the podcast earlier, Small Town Murder, and they were saying you can't dispute a claim saying, well, this was a party house and people were in and out of this house all the time. And they were saying these girls were very popular. So how do we know it wasn't someone who was like a jealous ex-boyfriend? Or because we know one of them was calling their ex-boyfriend, I think, like multiple times that night, which I think they had an alibi for him that was pretty solid. But how did, they were all out before at bars, and they were saying on this podcast, like, what if they would have said something dumb to a guy they were out and made this person mad, and they followed them home or something that night? So you don't know. That's why you have to be careful and just do the extra stuff, even if you think you already have a suspect that has, I guess, the most evidence against them.
I'm disappointed because I know that they're not going to be able to go inside the house, which would be the biggest thing for the jury to see. I know that you're pretty disappointed in this as well. For those of you who, I might have said this in the beginning of this episode, but I've definitely said it in past episodes of this series, the house was torn down. So I believe the house was given to the school. The school made the decision to tear it down. Amy feels strongly that was a bad decision, because you said it. I mean, you've experienced it because you've been on these scenes. Until you've been in rooms, can you really get someone else's point of view, right? Or that person's point of view that's on. So if a survivor is going to give her testimony, no one's going to understand what she's talking about because they can't relive that.
Right.
Not
and
in person.
They were saying in the ways that some of the decedents were even like placed in a room or where they were found, it wouldn't make as much sense to, I mean, they're going to have pictures. They'll probably have a 3D reconstruction. But even still, when you are putting yourself into that position in person, it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense. Like, I know, for example, working for like the medical examiner, we take pictures. I mean, myself, when I had homicides, I would take easily over 100 pictures. And even then, I mean, pictures do tell a story, but I might have follow-up questions from the doctors like, well, can you show me what kind of position they were in, or where was this doorway in conjunction to where the body was found? Like, can you show me, like, they want you to like act it out. Like, okay, here's the doorway. This is where the body was. And they're like, oh, well, that wasn't like as clear to me in the pictures. So being able to take jurors there, and even like you go in and you see like where they've cut out carpet and where they've like put their measurement tapes up on the walls and where they've taken pictures. It's all of your senses, right? You're indulged into that when you go into the crime scene.
I see it as like this. I believe it or not, cannot watch a scary movie. Can't watch a scary movie, right? But here we talk about cases every week that are gory and, whatever. But that's because we're just talking about it. We're taking notes. We're talking about it. I don't have visuals of anything. If I do, it's pictures. But in the movies, when you're watching the movie, you're like in that dark, scary room, or you're waiting for that thing to pop out. The adrenaline's going. My adrenaline's not going when we're talking about these cases. Like, it's different, right? And so that's where I think even if a juror was in a spot, and I keep thinking of the survivor's room where she kept looking out the door and looking at down the hall. Like, you don't know. And I feel like if I were behind, even just being in that house and knowing what happened, I feel like my adrenaline would be going. And I feel like then you could empathize a little bit more. Like, she was scared. Yeah. She's questioning what she was seeing, because we all question the things we see in the dark, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, I could swear I saw a shadow go by, and then it's like, well, maybe it was a car, maybe it was a cow. I don't know.
What else was in the house, like at that time? How was the lighting in that house? There's windows set, and you can't accurately depict, like, this is the way the sun hits on the house, and light might be shining, or street lights might be shining through a window, which may make someone look more distorted or look completely different.
Or give them bushy eyebrows.
Yeah, right. Casting shadows on those brows. I think especially when we're talking about like the survivors in the house, because I know that I would want to stand at her doorway and look through the door, like basically recreate that moment and see the angle at which you would, because a lot of times, if you're going through that, you say, okay, this person's standing here and this is how tall they are, and how tall is she, and what kind of angle is she looking at from this doorway? There's just so many factors that you can't recreate through pictures or a 3D reconstruction, unless you basically rebuilt it like a Hollywood studio and based everything off the pictures that you had. Even then, it's still not going to be the same thing. So
I feel like that is a pivotal piece in this puzzle. I feel like, with the exception of the DNA that they found, because we know that they've taken a lot of DNA, I feel like that's probably the next most important piece, because that would have told a story. And I feel like that's what they're really missing. And I really do feel like that would work in the defense's favor, because
yeah, well, and even like, they're saying, okay, they heard someone like whimpering, like crying, like from another camera. And so even if you were standing in that room and you're thinking, would it be plausible for, like, how loud would someone have to be screaming or crying or something in order for a camera 50 feet away or whatever outside of a house? Because I would want to know that. I'd be like, okay, well, if there were other people that heard this, or if they could hear what was going on, why wasn't this called in earlier or something? So you would want to know, or I would definitely be asking, are the walls that thin? What is this house made of then? Are you going to show me pictures of that? Are you going to tell me that? When was this house built? Those are just things that I think you would think of as if you were walking through a house. Like, yeah, I could see where it'd be easy for him to get through the house this way. Or maybe like, how did he get through this so fast? So like I've said before, because if you're not familiar with a place, it's like going to someone's house, right? And you're like looking for silverware. How many drawers do you open before you find the right one? So if you're looking for a particular person, I mean, I wouldn't think, unless you've been there before and you knew them, what room they're going to be in.
Right. So all of this is important because the jury will have to decide basically if he's guilty or not guilty. And if he is guilty, the prosecutor is pushing for the death penalty.
Yeah. So capital trial. This is basically a capital trial. And that's why Ann Taylor stepped in on this case, because that was basically put on the table.
So if he does get the death penalty, then there's two forms that they can do, right? So I think, what is one, like lethal injection?
Well, if it gets to that, because typically what happens after you have appeals for years and years and years, and sometimes people die in prison before then, or there's a lot of things that could happen between there. But I would foresee there being an appeal. So even if the capital punishment is what he is sentenced with, he might not even ever get there, because we know what we know about death row is those patients are not patients, suspects, or whoever they are that are in, because not all of them we found out are always guilty, because of the Innocence Clinic in DNA. So that's why we do appeals. But a lot of these people can sit in jail for decades, and it's more likely that they'll die from health reasons or being stabbed or shanked in jail first before they actually get put to death by the state.
Yeah, I was just talking to my husband about San Quentin and Scott Peterson. So I do have a friend whose husband went to San Quentin. He had to make sure, create and this is off topic, but he had to create an emergency exit plan in case something were to happen, because this is after COVID. And he said when he walked down death row, it just felt like evil. It just felt, yeah, he said evil. So, but we were talking about Scott Peterson, and I don't know if Scott Peterson is still on death row, and I don't know if he's even still at San Quentin, but apparently there's a new documentary.
Yes, I was just going to say that. It's on Netflix. It's fresh.
Yeah, so I'll have to look at that. But the only reason that I'm even bringing up the death penalty is because, so Idaho has had the death penalty since 1864. And the primary method of execution is lethal injection. But if the state can't carry out the sentence by that method within 5 days of the execution warrant, a firing squad can be used.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? Some states still do that. The problem with lethal injection, honestly, this is in my opinion, as scary as, he would have something like overstates and you don't know which one. Cause it's firing squad is basically they set up 5 people and basically they all have blanks except for one. And it kind of seems like a form of torture, right? Because it's the anxiety of that. But lethal injection can go wrong. What they've seen happen in some cases, it's this specific drug. And I know that they have to inject a couple different things into the veins. So they'll set up an IV in them first, and then they'll put the drugs into the IV. And basically what the first one does is it kind of puts you in this comatose state where you're not supposed to feel anything. But what they've seen in some cases, what's happened, if that drug is bad, it will actually burn up someone's veins, or it won't kill them within what you would say a timely manner. Basically, they don't want people to suffer. And so that's why there's this second option. And I don't think the drug is even available in every state. So I think it's the availability of the drug. And I want to say it was certain states stopped doing this because it had happened a couple times. So the states didn't want to be liable for basically any civil suits of harsh punishment, right? Because of your amendment rights, stuff like that, your constitutional amendment rights. So families sometimes of the suspect where this has happened, they have sued the state or that prison for that.
Isn't it ironic that somebody could be sued over something like that? And in this case, 4 kids were brutally murdered, and they didn't get to sue anybody. Nobody gets to sue anybody for being murdered. It's just
well, you can have wrongful death suits. So that's civil court though, right? And so it's a totally, no, it's you'd be starting over, and that's where you get compensation. But it's the families aren't, what do you value on a life, right? What do you put on a life? But 2, it's okay, so you say that this person's guilty of this, and so you convict them and tell them, okay, well, now you're having to pay these families each this many millions of dollars. They're never going to see that because he can't pay that. So who's paying that then? It would be more likely that you would see them either sue the school or the PD, and it would be a wrongful death suit or a negligence type of thing. Or I would hate to see this happen, but if maybe one of the survivors, I could see angry parents going after one of those kids because they didn't call 911 earlier. And so there you're always wondering, well, could someone's life have been saved if they would have called earlier? So that's where you see like the wrongful death suits and stuff like that. So again, that's civil court. And so like this is like criminal court, where criminal is like punishment, right? Civil court is basically all monetary actions. So, but you would have to go through a whole another trial, and that's more years, right? How long do you want to go through that?
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so I'm going to leave you with this. And this may not be a part of the trial, but this is wrapping up the entire series. Could Brian Koberger be framing someone else? It's like, do you think that he could have set somebody else up to take the fall, or he's taking the fall right now and somebody else did it?
Okay, so someone would be setting him up.
No, what if he put himself in the situation because he thought he could get out of it, but really he maybe was one of two people in this whole thing, and he's just like, I'll be the fall guy if you go and do this. So do you think that is a possibility?
It would be hard for me to decide that without having names of other people, because there again, they said that he's a loner. And so, I mean, I don't even know if he talked to people outside of like school stuff. So, I mean, how comfortable would you be going out to somebody and be like, hey, I got a job for you. I'm going to make you the fall guy for this. But
I'm just thinking of his Reddit post, like how maybe he did find somebody from Reddit, or maybe he did like was part of a group. And that would be really interesting if what do loners, and I don't even want to say loner because I like to spend time by myself. Yeah. Okay. Well, I wish I was a loner. I like being by myself. But what do people who are by themselves do? Like maybe he's chatting online. Maybe while he's doing
social
research.
Media.
Yeah, social media. Like you still want to be engaged in the world, right? So, I mean, and he still was. Right. Yeah. It could be that he built a bond with somebody else.
Yeah. And they always say, though, like, wait for the evidence to show up in trial, because we will see digital, because you would see a lot of receipts of him talking or communicating with someone, unless he did have another phone. We saw that they collected, I think, phones from his residence, but they're going to be looking for any communication that's going to be frequent. So even if you had someone that had a burner phone that they switched out every time you called or every day or something, you would still have receipts or something. I mean, unless he took out cash and he paid cash for everything, that would get really expensive. And he's a student, right? Living in an apartment. I don't know if he would have funding to do this kind of stuff. And you would see some type of monetary transaction between him and that person if someone was basically hiring him. So what, would he have a hiding place for cash if that's what it was? They'll be checking like things like Venmo or Cash App, or his banking statements are definitely going to be something that's going to be brought up, because they're going to be looking for the things that were purchased that we know that were worn or seen wearing. So they're going to be looking for that stuff. I mean, it's so hard now to get away with that kind of stuff because of all the things that are intertwined with the crime. They even say, like, when I listen to some podcasts, they're like, if you're only offering to pay someone $1,000 to be a hitman, you're probably hiring a cop that's undercover for like a sting operation, because who's going to be willing to do that for that much money? I mean, what if you got caught? Because it's like, wow, $1,000, like, cool. I mean, a professional person would be charging a lot more for one. So how would he and that person, one, communicate with each other, or monetary transactions? Because I wouldn't see someone doing this for free, or like, yes, I got my vengeance on them, like the whole house. I don't know, because there again, would he have to look at pictures of these people and memorize their faces? Because there again, we had the survivors in the house. So he knew who to pick out and what rooms they were going to be in, unless it was someone that was constantly at their house. They would have to have a pretty big vendetta, against them to have, I don't know, there again, we don't know why he did this.
Right.
Or
I don't even know that there was a vendetta. Yeah. So I wish it's a theory. Like I started thinking about it, and it's like, what if he really didn't do it? Because he seems so confident, in everything that he's doing. So
I think he was very sure in himself that he would get away with this, but for the reasons why he was arrested, you have to have like a preponderance of evidence. Like, you have to confirm that you have this much evidence against someone to even make an arrest. And so there must be some really good stuff that we don't know about that they're kind of hiding behind, their chest, or that they're hiding or holding back that they don't want the public to know, which happens a lot in trials, because then you can get that thrown out in court too if you think that was like released where all the public could find out about it. So that's basically why, like, even in police investigations, which I know the family was so upset about, they said, how long it took them to make an arrest. But I don't know. That's a good question. And maybe that's something that defense could even say, like, they could do in their cross examinations. Like, how do you even know that it was him and not someone else involved?
I'm just wondering, maybe he's going to blame someone else, because I just think the evidence points towards him, but he seems like cool, calm, and collected. So,
well, his alibi is that he was out looking at the stars, and that's where he liked driving to, because he liked running and stuff. But who goes there at that time in November? You know how cold it is there during that time? Like, I know how cold it is here in November in the middle of the night. You better be wearing multiple layers. And I trip all the time just on my own feet. How do you're out there jogging at night in the middle of like a trail? Like, how dangerous does that seem? And what other kind of wild animals are out there? So not a great alibi, but I mean, hey, if that's what you got, that's what you give. So
and maybe he did go out there, and maybe that's where some of the clothes, or maybe that's where he dumped some stuff. So it's not like he's lying, right? Because do you take lie detector tests for that kind of stuff?
I mean, they can. If he was a suspect and they brought him in before technically like arresting him, they could have done a polygraph for that. So maybe they do have that, because you can admit that it is admissible to trial as evidence.
Amy knows all about polygraph tests.
Yeah, I just did one. It was so fun. But I don't know if they did one or not on him. I didn't see anything or read anything, but there again, maybe that's something else, like they're not telling anybody that maybe he did have a polygraph.
Well, that concludes our 5-part series. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and hopefully it gives you some insight on what's to come in this trial. It's super sad. And like I said, I was interested in it for the reasons that it just didn't seem possible that somebody could do something like this in such a small amount of time, in a town like this, in a house like that. It's just mind-blowing to me.
We'll get a lot more information once the trial starts from the media. And I think that will help draw a better picture of what happened that night. But we have to wait and see.
Well, and when that happens, Amy and I will do like maybe another mini series on it, or just like a monthly series, because we know that this could go on for a very long time. So if you guys have any questions, you can email us at kelly@diaryofadeathinvestigator.com, or message us on our Instagram page, Diary of a Death Investigator. I am going to figure out how we can record on our long, long journey. I feel like Lord of the Rings.
Well, I might even, because I told you this before, like, oh, you could toss body out here and no one would ever know. Or so
yeah, Kelly and Amy stop to look at what's in the bag.
Yeah, well, sometimes mind your business. I'd rather not know.
But we did start brainstorming on some episodes for October. I didn't realize this. Maybe you guys knew this. The Chainsaw Massacre was based on a true story.
Texas Chainsaw. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's actually it's a pretty interesting case. So, and it's older, and it's an older case, but I think people are really interested in it. They like horror slasher films. So,
yeah. And then we talked about Amityville Horror Story. So we might do the house. Talk about the house.
You know what their problem was, Kelly? They didn't have sage.
Oh my gosh. Just so you guys know, and then we'll let you go. I've been doing this parasite toxin cleanse. I'm on day 4, which is why my brain is like mush. It's actually not so mushy, and in my box, I got sage, like a sage stick. My office smells so good right now. And
I love the way it smells, but yeah.
Because apparently that's where I got to ward off all the bad juju is in my office. And
You
then
gotta cleanse your aura.
I do have a sage like stick, like not like wood stick, but like stick, the way you use to cleanse your house. So I might bring that to your new place and we can rub the Bible on the walls.
I got 3 bags of sage. Are you kidding me? I've been saging forever. So all those ghosts that were following me home from work. So I don't know.
I don't want anything close to me. So we got to make sure that that's like, we'll do the car or whatever before we leave. But thanks for listening. We appreciate you guys. And until next time.
Bye.